All right, we got done with our post-game show late Saturday night. I sat down to write the Bracketology column, and I had the opposite problem of the week before. The week before, I was like, how do I set up these scenarios so that I can figure out who to put in? Because there's so many options. After these games, Ari, I was like, how do I set up these scenarios so I have 12 teams in? Because it felt like all of the options had lost.
Well,
so it was a challenge.
What occurred to me was that the saucy nugget that I was boasting and taking a victory lap over this week, the saucy nugget take of there will be teams at the end of the year who feel like they got screwed, actually did not come true. It felt like it was coming true last week when the SEC had a logjam, but it's pretty crazy what happens to clear the highway when Ole Miss and A&M and Alabama all lose on the same day. So it looks like everybody who gets in is going to be just for getting in, and everybody who gets left out is going to be just for being left out. And the regular season, I think at the end of the day, will end up taking care of it for us. But, to me, I came into the weekend, Andy, or to the evening, feeling as if this bubble watch bracketology exercise was going to be incredibly difficult. But I actually found that once I figured out the tiebreakers or who's likely going to be playing in the conference championship games, that it was actually quite easy. So I don't know if you had the same experience as you were working through it, but did you struggle at all outside of who do you put in once you figured it out?
Not really. Who do I put in felt fairly easy. I remember getting to number 11, which would be my final at large, and thinking, okay, how do I do this? Do I dip into the 3-loss teams? Do I make the ACC a 2-bid league? And I actually found it fairly easy to predict the ACC as a 2-bid league. Now, obviously, SMU or Miami can screw that up if they lose next week. But right now, if Miami beats Syracuse and SMU beats Cal, I feel like the ACC championship game loser is going to have a pretty deserving resume. Like they're going to be pretty deserving of an at-large bid.
You considered a 3-loss SEC team over a 2-loss ACC loser of the conference championship game, and I want to ask you in reverse because I didn't consider that at all when I was doing my project. Do you think the committee even thinks about that for a minute? Because I don't.
I do. I think they might.
Really?
Because we had situations in the 4 team where there was a 2-loss team that you thought, oh, they're not even going to consider them, and they wound up being number 5 over a 1-loss number 6. Like, it'll happen that some of them gets considered, but I just don't think there's anybody who can make that case right now. I think
it's
the
like
loser
who do you
of the
turn to in this scenario. That's the thing. It's like which 3-loss team, the only one that you could make the case is they're playing really well and they had some weird losses at the beginning of the year that they have clearly not held on to, is South Carolina, but they would have had head-to-head losses to the 2 teams that you can't possibly
to Ole Miss and Alabama. And you always default to Alabama in this situation.
Yeah.
But I mean, they lost to Vanderbilt. The way they lost to Oklahoma was pathetic. Like that was awful. And Oklahoma has been bad. Like there is no, it's the rugged SEC. Like you cannot excuse a 24-3 loss to Oklahoma to this Oklahoma team. You can't.
You can't.
I mean, so that's
and as you
why,
pointed out, they're not out of the woods in the Auburn game yet either. They could lose that one and be like off the bubble completely. Yeah.
If Auburn plays the way it did in the first half against Texas A&M, they won't just beat Alabama. They would win comfortably. Now, if Auburn plays like they did in the 3rd and 4th quarters, Alabama will win the game. But that's the thing. I don't even think we're having a conversation. Now, you and I had a conversation about this because I think your bubble watch is different. I'm still predicting Oregon to beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. You are predicting Ohio State to beat Oregon. I think that's fine. You can do it any way you want to. They're both really good. They played once. It was a 1-point game. So however anybody wants to feel about that is fine. I do feel like I'm pretty comfortable with the loser of that game being the 5 seed.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that once the graphic hits Twitter today for Bubble Watch, people are going to freak out. And then I actually think that Oregon fans should write me like a letter of thank you for giving us an easier path to the semifinal. If you go look at the way that all works out, where we veered also too, and you can get more of this in the Bubble Watch explanation video that's also going to be up on this channel today. is that I don't even have Boise in my field anymore. So like they would be playing UNLV in that scenario. So, I think that going into the Big Ten championship game, if things hold the way that they are right now, it would actually be advantageous for either team to lose that game. And I think that people get upset when you say that. And I know that the Big Ten championship matters. And I'm assuming that Oregon in its first year in the conference would love to hang that banner. And I know Ohio State, who hasn't won it in 4 or 5 years now, would love to hang that banner too in their facilities. And, they play to win and all those things. I get it. But in terms of pure path to the semifinals, there's no question that number 5 is easier than number 1.
Yeah. Now, I have a different situation with my 12 seed and with my 4 seed. So I have Boise State as the 4 seed still in. The reason I did that is because we're projecting, and I watched the whole Boise State-Wyoming game. Boise State did not look good. Mm-hmm. Ashton Genty was banged up at the end of that game. Boise State was lucky to win, and Wyoming is not a good team. So it is entirely possible.
I switched.
Yeah, it is entirely possible that Boise, especially if Ashton Genty gets more banged up, they're playing Oregon State next week. They're going to be playing UNLV. As long as UNLV beats Nevada next week, they'll be playing UNLV for the conference title. It's entirely possible UNLV beats them. If they don't, though, if Boise State goes 12-1, I don't think the Big 12 champ is going to pass them. I think Boise State will be the 4 seed if they're 12-1. And that's the one where the graphic hits social media. People are going to go berserk. Now, I think the way the committee ranked them last week has sort of softened that a little bit, because where ESPN during the show puts them into the bracket based on the way they're ranked, they had Boise State as a 4 seed. So it definitely helps educate a little bit. But the awareness gap is still there about how the seeding works. It is entirely possible. And one other thing I want to point out, because this is one I keep getting from a lot of people, and I understand why you think this because it's confusing. The top 5 ranked conference champs get into the playoff. They do not get the top 5 seeds. The top 4 ranked conference champs get the top 4 seeds. The 5th one isn't tied to a bye, isn't tied to any particular seed. So if they are, ranked 5th or lower down to 11, they're just that number. If they are ranked below 12, they get moved up to 12. I know it's so confusing, and I'm sorry. Let's talk about PrizePicks. I did not have the best day on Saturday on PrizePicks. Alabama receiver Ryan Williams helped me out with the a longest reception of 30 yards, which was more than the 23.5 PrizePicks square that I selected. But I did not get the Will Howard rushing yardage for Ohio State against Indiana, because really, Ohio State was running the ball well with its backs, did not need Will Howard's legs that much. So that play did not work. What do? I know. Monday Night Football is going to help me out. We got a Harbaugh Bowl. Harbaugh Bowl on Monday Night Football. So I'm going to play that on PrizePicks. If you're not playing PrizePicks already, best daily fantasy game in America. Use the code Staples when you sign up. You play $5, you get $50 instantly. Let's look at the Harbaugh Bowl on Monday Night Football, because we got Justin Herbert, Oregon Duck. His team's angling for the number 1 seed in the college football playoff right now, but he's also angling for a pretty good seed in the NFL playoffs if the Chargers keep playing the way they have been. Playing great for Jim Harbaugh. By the way, helping out Jim Harbaugh, a Buckeye named J.K. Dobbins. Like, we could see a Buckeye helping out Jim Harbaugh on the week of the Ohio State-Michigan game. J.K. Dobbins, 48.5 rushing yards, more or less. I'm thinking maybe more. Derrick Henry, the other top back in this game, 86.5 rushing yards. That seems a lot against a very physical Chargers defense, but it is Derrick Henry, and he's a freak. And, of course, Lamar Jackson, 237.5 passing yards. Will he go more or less? It's the first Harbaugh Bowl since that Super Bowl where Beyonce turned out the lights. It's going to be electric. It's going to be more fun if you're playing on PrizePicks. So download the app. Use the code Staples. Play $5. Get $50 instantly. So, Ari, let's talk about my 12, because I've got Arizona State there. It doesn't have to be Arizona State. It's just catch-all Big 12 champ. There are 4 teams tied for the Big 12 champion to get into the Big 12 championship game right now with 2 conference losses. So it's Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, and Iowa State. Any combination of those could wind up playing in the championship game. And actually, if all 4 of them lose, it actually could be Baylor, Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game. I concocted a scenario last night where Colorado played Baylor for the Big 12 champion. Like, it's nuts. But Arizona State is the hottest team in the Big 12, not named Kansas. Kansas has been mathematically eliminated, so I had Arizona State here.
Yeah, I put Arizona State here because Arizona State goes to the Big 12 championship game against Iowa State if all 4 teams win next week.
Yes, correct.
And finish in a 4-way tie. And I thought that, Arizona State has the most scenarios or pathways to that game. And I also think that they're the hottest team right now. So you put all those things together and you have Arizona State there at the end. And that makes a lot of sense. And I'm not 100% sure if I'm on board with your Boise as the 4 seed thought, but I'm excited to see how that plays out because the Big 12 champion certainly is not as strong or doesn't seem as strong as we thought it could be maybe a week ago. But at the same time, too, Arizona State's still a 2-loss team that's got a lot of, firepower behind it.
Okay, so you tell me, because the committee has to just jump them. So the committee has to move Arizona State above Boise State. When do they do that? Do they do that next week if Arizona State beats Arizona?
I think they would probably do it and be justified in doing so if Arizona State finishes the job and wins the Big 12 championship.
And that's after Boise State beats UNLV for a second time, which is also a team that's ranked by the committee?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. I think if Boise State is 12-1, they're going to be the 4 seed. My question is whether Boise State's going to be 12-1. I think that is the bigger question.
It's not helping your cause that Boise State's like struggling with Wyoming for 4 quarters right now, and I think that like the committee is. There's already an inherent.
Penn State struggled with Minnesota. They won.
No, I know, but there's levels to this, and I think that you cannot excuse how the committee has traditionally treated Group of 5 teams in this discussion. It's not just it's not an apple for apple scenario here. So, I'm not saying you're wrong and it can't happen. I'm just saying I would give some.
No, you are having no faith in the committee to engage in an honest dialogue about what it's already done and the rankings it's already put out.
Yeah, and I also think that the committee will, although they say they will never project forward, or probably project forward and say who do we think would win that game, and I think they would pick Arizona State. Also, too, existential crisis on my hands here. But when you talk about the Group of 5, if you want to go down the rabbit hole of the Boise State situation, if Boise State were to lose to UNLV, then maybe Tulane goes. Like, I'm not necessarily sure that UNLV would be the shoe-in to go in that scenario. So, although I think they would have avenged one of their 2 losses, and their other one was a late Friday night loss to Syracuse in a game where they got jobbed by the refs at the end. So,
and UNLV also beat Kansas and Houston. So they beat power conference teams. Tulane lost their 2 games to power conference teams, which were Kansas State and Oklahoma, which did not wind up being superpowers.
Yeah.
Like Kansas State was good. Oklahoma, not so much. Now, there's pre-Oklahoma injuries, so a little bit different. But let's talk about the rest of the bracket. So, like we said, loser of the Big Ten championship game is going to be there at number 5, probably the most advantageous path. Penn State, I've got them at 6. They barely beat Minnesota, but they benefit from everybody else kind of falling out. They're not going to wind up getting compared to these 2-loss SEC teams other than Tennessee. They're going to be, in the mix here. I like that James Franklin got aggressive and won the game on his own terms. The fake punt, the going for it on 4th down a couple of times, like that's how you're going to have to call it if you want to win these games in the playoff. So I'm kind of excited to see them now in the playoff.
Yeah, they get to host a playoff game, it looks like, and they're not going to be scrutinized. So Penn State, they always are annually. Sorry, I just can't say that word.
Perennially will work too.
Annually seem to be a team that ranks in between 10 and 13 and would just be the beneficiary of one of the last spots. And actually, Tennessee, they had a much better year than they typically have. And maybe it's because Michigan wasn't very good and they did only lose the 1 game on their schedule against a really good team, but they're going to finish probably with the 6 or 7 seed at this point and host a game. So that's going to be nice little situation for them for sure.
You want to watch me make the chat light up? You ready? You ready?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
I got Notre Dame at number 7. Here it comes. Here it comes. Did you remember that Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois? Did you remember? Look in the chat. I guarantee you it's saying that right now. Guarantee.
Yeah. Well, good thing we're not looking at it. But yes, I think that people fixate on that, and Notre Dame undressed Army last night and is in a really, really good spot. They still have to go out and beat USC. USC beat UCLA on Saturday night. Maybe it's a tough game. I don't know what's going on, but they're all both firmly in.
Yeah. I know everybody wants to be mad about that, wants it to be an example of how Notre Dame gets preferential treatment. But the thing is, if we're going to respect the group of 5 teams who are playing well, like Navy came in undefeated and Notre Dame crushed them. Army came in undefeated. Notre Dame crushed them. Notre Dame has a win at Texas A&M. The team I have at number 8 is Texas. We're saying Texas needs to get that win at Texas A&M to firmly put itself in the playoff. Like, I don't see a lot of differences with Notre Dame and these other teams we're talking about. So,
yeah.
And again,
Notre Dame's loss is uglier, but they also have taken care of business at a level that the other teams haven't. And I've said this before, Andy, but I'm less alarmed by losing to NIU in a sleepwalking game than getting your doors blown off by Georgia at home in the one big game you played. If you want to actually like nitpick resumes that are firmly in, I think that's more than fair. And I think
that's right. And I have Texas in. Texas needs to beat Texas A&M. They'll go to the SEC championship game in that case. Now, at that point, they can play for a much higher seed. They can play for the 2 seed probably. But if they win that game against Texas A&M, they will play against Georgia. If they lose to Georgia, they'll still be in. Here's my question, though, Ari. This is the really interesting one. What if Texas A&M beats Texas, and then A&M loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game, thereby taking its 4th loss? Texas probably still gets an at-large at 10-2, and A&M probably gets left out. Like, that's psychological torture for the Aggies right there.
Yeah, which makes you want to pick Texas A&M because that's exactly how you feel like it's going to turn out for those poor people. The way that they lost that game. If you go watch our Saturday night reaction show, like that reaction, people were texting me, "Did you lose money on A&M?" The way that I reacted, and frankly speaking, I had $0 on that game. That was my genuine, real reaction to watching how they lost. And it's like, why can't these people just be happy? Like what did they do? Like, you want to talk about curses? I mean, geez. And if they go out and beat Texas, that'd be the biggest, most euphoric night of Texas A&M football, maybe since the Johnny Manziel era. And then it would be met with the worst nightmare ever, which is a confirmation of the inferiority complex that they possess when it comes to that team. Beating Texas is still not good enough to get chosen over them. That's like some diabolical, always the bridesmaid type of stuff. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So next up, I've got Tennessee at 9 and Indiana at 10. You can put them in whatever order you want. Basically, these were the teams we were arguing about last week because we thought they were going to be the 2 fighting for the last at-large after Indiana lost to Ohio State. Indiana lost to Ohio State. Ohio State dominated the game. That was what a lot of people predicted. And that's kind of what we were running the hypothetical argument off of. But now I don't think that matters. Like, put them wherever you want between 9 and 11. Let them go on the road and let them earn it. Let them prove it. Like, if Tennessee goes on the road, in this situation, Tennessee would have to go to Austin, which would be great because that is a game involving 2 SEC teams that did not play this year. Like, that would be a lot of fun to see Tennessee play at Texas, the whole real UT thing, like different shades of orange. It'd be really cool. It'd be a great game. Indiana, in this scenario, in this particular bracket, would go north to South Bend and play for the state title. Yeah. And the right to move on.
Yeah, I was looking at the bracket that I came up with too, and there's a lot of interesting first round games. So for sure. And I love that the SEC had all beat up on each other, and we still need more games to prove who's the best team in the SEC. That's very funny to me, but that's the era we're in. But yeah, I'm the most intrigued, and I think that'll be a story of this bowl season of which teams are going to go up north and show us who's actually superior, because there's a lot of, SEC stinks this year. Indiana stinks. Like, watching Indiana play a team from the SEC that was in that cluster will be fascinating because we'll get a real litmus test in those games of whether or not Indiana is closer to Ohio State or closer to Purdue. Like, I think that they're closer to Ohio State. So we'll see.
Yeah. And the thing is, I like that with those two particularly, like, send them on the road. If they win a tough game on the road and advance in the playoff, then we didn't need to have that argument. Like, they both earned it, and it's fine. I like that, because just handing one of them a home game might be a little bit different. But I think if they go on the road and win a game and advance, then great. Ari, I'm very excited about this. The matchups are spectacular. This is going to be so much fun if this is how it turns out. That said, this past weekend was so crazy, and what we see going forward might change it considerably, because we still have 2 more weekends. We still have the rivalry week and championship weekend to shake some more of these spots out. And we may be having a completely different conversation a week from now. And I'm here for it.